Okay, since you guys, I think, had a good chance to tackle questions, and I was sending out some invitations to family members because I plopped the date for the 10-year anniversary on the church calendar to claim it before I started actually telling people. And I was like, I eventually have to tell my family members, so. And I come from a big family on both sides, so there's a lot of people to tell, and I don't have all their phone numbers, so hopefully people will start to spread things. I keep getting asked, everyone's curious about the food. It's going to be kind of funny. You should know that most of the things I've made for large groups of people I've never made before. And it's a bit of an adventure to see if it's going to work.
Adventures are fun.
And somehow, I have not yet poisoned anyone. I did have one person when I was in Jamestown tell me that she couldn't cook with me in the kitchen anymore. So she went into her living room while I finished things. Well, because I kept saying oops, and she's like, why do you say oops? What's oops? Well, and that time I was trying to make the soup and I was adding an herb to it, and the lid fell off. And so the lid fell into the soup, and then there was, and I think what was it? Maybe it was parsley, and I was like, well, there's going to be a lot of parsley in it. That's the way it goes. I think it was parsley or basil or something, but it was just sort of funny. She kept saying, she was like, you just keep oopsing. Stop it. It's causing me stress. We're still alive and kicking today, and everyone enjoyed the meal. Okay, so we're moving toward the end of chapter 8. And it seems good. We've done this a few times in the past, but just to read a little bit from the scripture passage.
What page are you on?
This is 129. The notes are page 64. When Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side. A scribe approached him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus answered him, "Foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head." Another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, let me go first and bury my father." But Jesus answered him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their dead." He got into a boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a violent storm came up on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves, but he was asleep. They came and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." He said to them, "Why are you terrified, O you of little faith?" Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. The men were amazed and said, "What sort of man is this, whom even the winds and the seas obey?" And then he arrives at the territory of the Gadarenes. Two demoniacs from the tombs meet him. He drives the demons out of them into a herd of swine or pigs, and the pigs crash into the sea. Remember, the kids at school are amazed that I have been to Israel. And one of the things, they were like, "Well, what'd you think?" They always ask me what I think. And I don't like that question because I didn't have the greatest trip to Israel when I went. Most of you, if you went, had a better trip. But there's things that just are so discordant that I still don't know what to do with them. It's like you have the Sea of Galilee and it's this romantic place in your mind where Jesus is. And then there's something about seeing a jet ski zip by and you're like, no, get off, go away. But it's like a resort kind of place in Israel. That's what people do. It's you can't jet ski on the Sea of Galilee. This is biblical. And then you realize that, well, I guess they can. I mean, we don't make the rules, and it's just different. There's things that, one of the things that bugged me about Israel is there's so little, except for the Sea of Galilee, that's like what Jesus would have seen. Everything's rubble and they built on top of it. So when you're in Jerusalem, and you're on the street level now of what they call the Old City, but the Old City is an Ottoman city from the 1500s. You have to walk down these steep stairs to get to these chapels for the Stations of the Cross. You go down all these stairs and then you get to these chapels for the Stations of the Cross. Well, those chapels are on the street level of what it was when it was in Jesus' time. You're like, that's like 20 feet. There's like 20 feet of junk. Because in that part of the world, when you want to build something new, you knock over what was there and you sort of level it and turn it into gravel, and then you build on top of it. But it's just like, oh, well, so it's just like, so none of this is here? Nope. Like sometimes it's like, well, that rock was, but nothing else. And it's just, I don't know, like something about, I think it's part of the modern idea, but something for us is like, we want to get back to what it was like. I don't know. They don't like to do this, but I would love it if they rebuilt like ancient Jerusalem so you could walk through it and like, what did it look like? What did a bread bakers look like? How did they weave wool or weave, like sheep? How did they turn the wool from sheep into a thread to use for clothing? And how did they make clothing? And how did they make pots and all sorts of other things that they used a lot of? Because the thing about ruins, when you've seen ruins, after a while they all look the same. It's like there's things on the ground and they're kind of in squares and there's sand around them and they're like, oh, this was the house of Peter. And you're like, great. And this is the house of Caesar. And oh, it looks the same. And that's the house of this guy. Oh, yeah, it's about a ruin. And I don't know, it's just like, yeah, but not my thing. Which is really fascinating that if you go to Rome, you can actually go into much older churches than they have in the Holy Land. The oldest church in Jerusalem is a Crusader church from the 1100s. I think it's called St. Anne's. That's the oldest one there. Parts of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre are older, but very little of that original building is left. It's been knocked down and rebuilt so many times and destroyed. In Rome, you can walk into churches like St. Cecilia, Santa Cecilia in Trastevere. That church is from the 300s. Santa Sabina in Rome on the hill outside of town is another church that's from the early 300s. So you're in churches that are 800 years older than most of the ones that you see in the Holy Land. And I don't fault the Holy Land for that, but it's just like, for me, it wasn't quite as magical as I imagined it to be, because you don't get to walk into like, this is the synagogue that Jesus sat in, and this is the chair that he sat in. It's a little bit more like, well, this thing on the ground and that spot, that's where he was, maybe. It's just different. Today we have Jesus launching a foreign mission. So at this part, he is sailing across the Sea of Galilee, probably from the west side to the east side. He's sailing across the Sea of Galilee, and it's easy to miss out on the significance of this because at the time of Jesus, the north and west side, where most of the Christian sites are, like Capernaum and those kind of things, they're a little bit off of the midpoint to the west of the Sea of Galilee. If you sail across to the east side, you're in Gentile territory. The land at the time of Jesus was called the Decapolis. If you watch The Chosen, this is where it's the land where there's all these different groups. There's Jews who are trying desperately to cling to their traditions, and there's Greeks and there's other groups. And they have like the meeting of the 5 peoples right by the feeding of the 5,000. That is kind of what this area was like, the Decapolis. It means the 10 cities, Decapolis. And over there, he has 2 people that want to follow him, and he says no. And it's a little bit puzzling why. I would admit to you that I don't exactly know. I don't think there's not, to me, one answer that just works for all of it. It's kind of like, well, that fits a little bit and that fits a little bit. So it could be that they were trying to follow him conditionally. Like the first one, the scribe, says, Lord, I want to follow you. And he kind of rebukes him, like, well, foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. I mean, maybe the scribe was wealthy and he was like wanting a wealthy lifestyle. I mean, one of the things that we can do in this kind of situation is assume that Jesus knows what he's doing. That's a good assumption to make. that if Jesus doesn't let someone follow him as a disciple or as an apostle, that he knows what he's doing. I think that's a good assumption to make. I think that's fair. And whether it's in what they asked or how they asked, maybe it was in the time and the place, we don't exactly know. But he doesn't let them follow him. And part of it could be that, Jesus and his apostles were probably homeless at some points. I mean, like where they just had to sleep in open countryside. Maybe they had tents and things that they would bring around with them. Certainly they could have lived a simple lifestyle, but the evidence seems to be that if people didn't give them anything, they didn't have anything. Or at least they didn't keep a lot of money for themselves and to spend on themselves. So following Jesus isn't meant to be a life of luxury. It's not meant to be easy in that way. And that's something that has always echoed for me, because it's easy to lose sight of the reality that even if you have financial issues, and there are people that do in our country, we still live in the wealthiest society that has ever existed on the face of the earth. And if you look at it historically speaking, like it's not even a competition. It's not even close. I remember going through a house, I'm never going to remember whose house it was. It was one of these mansions north along the Hudson River from the robber barons from Wall Street. One of them that has a bad reputation for making a lot of people lose their job and making a pile of money. He built this house out north of New York City. And it was considered the lap of luxury, like this palace. And it had 2 bathrooms. In a giant house where he would entertain people. It's like, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that people in like 200 years ago actually had bladders and drank liquid. Because they didn't put bathrooms anywhere. I mean, could you imagine hosting 30 people in your house and having 1 bathroom for them to use? Like they put in a second, or they put in an extra one, but they had to like wedge it into a wall. And the guide made the point, in some ways they were very wealthy, but the son of the man died from a curable infection. And he's like, he would have probably traded everything he had for a cheap antibiotic that you could get from the store. And so I just think our perspective can get to be a little off. And that doesn't mean our questions aren't serious or our struggles don't matter. But just sometimes it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to get the brand new X, Y, and Z, or I'm not going to be able to go on vacation, or do this thing that I want to do. And we can get kind of our knickers in a twist about it. And, at the end of the day, just the fact that there's like a Walmart that you can go into and buy just about anything you can conceive of is really, really amazing. Like people in history haven't had that. In Jesus' time, there's no supermarket where okay, we need to feed people. You go buy the food there. Certainly there had to be markets of some kind, but there's no Walmart in the ancient world. In fact, I think many of the towns in the ancient world would fit inside of a modern Walmart. I wonder what they would think about our stores. We just have such a different concept of things. So I think it's good to reinforce that. And then the next guy comes, and he talks about let me go first. Is it let me go first and bury my mother and father? Is that the phrase?
It's just father.
Let me go first and bury my father.
That's what it says.
Yeah. And bury my father. And Jesus says, let the dead bury their dead. Now, this is even stranger because one could object, but Jesus, burying the dead is a work of mercy. This is Jewish. You even tell people not to break the law. But I think it places an emphasis on the priority of following Christ. The key of this whole thing, I think, is that to follow him means to genuinely be with him. And this is meant to be kind of unconditional. And that's hard. I don't pretend this is easy as a priest. I don't think any of us should have a false idea that somehow like, oh yeah, I'm with Jesus, it's all going to be easy. Like, no, I think the disciples are saints because this was like sandpaper. This was, being polished in ways that they didn't like very much. Real discipleship, real Christianity is like that. It kind of hits you between the eyeballs. And you have to say, wait a minute. Jesus, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to go there. I don't know if I want to go that far. Sometimes it can be simple as, Jesus, I don't want to change the light bulb. I'm not very mechanically inclined. We had one of our parishioners here at Holy Spirit, something in his car wasn't working and he had to replace the light bulb. And he took the whole front end of it apart to do it. And I was like, I think the guy's kind of a rocket scientist. I would be terrified even after watching the video 100 times of like, I don't like slime and I don't like grease and I don't like the inside of car bonnets and all of those kinds of things. So, sometimes I tell the students like the call of Jesus is doing your homework. They don't like that very much either. Sometimes the call of Jesus is cleaning up the pile of stuff that's been sitting somewhere for a decade and you've been thinking about and has been bothering you. Sometimes the call of Jesus is doing a good job making a meal or taking those extra steps that maybe no one will ever notice. But there's meant to be a reality to life with Christ, and that is at the center of things. So Jesus places his call to follow him even over the sacred duty to parents and those who have died. To really follow Jesus takes genuine commitment. And it's, in a way, it's beautiful and it's powerful and it's transforming, but it's also genuinely uncomfortable. You know you're doing it right when you're not all yippee and happy to go at it. Because usually then I think you're on the right track. There's a reality that it's easy to put other things before Christ. It's easy to get other things, to get our priorities mixed up. To choose elsewhere, especially when it comes to stuff like fasting and almsgiving. And, one of the things that amazes me, sometimes I think teenagers have things that are wrong with their brains because the amount of material that comes into the school from Starbucks every morning is unbelievable. I think that we should start a Starbucks. If you guys want to go in with me, we could put one next door to the school and we would make so much money you wouldn't even believe it. It's really crazy. And yet, if they were asked to donate the same $7 that they spend on one of those things, they'd all of a sudden have to stop and think about it and they'd breathe twice, like, why are you asking for so much money? And it's like, you don't have any problem drinking it. So sometimes Jesus sounds harsh. I think we could call this the problem of the half-hearted. The problem of people that kind of want to say, I'll follow you, Jesus, but. I'll do this, but. And I can be one of those people all the time. I mean, it's really crazy how easy this is. But I think the key to it all, why does Jesus ask this of us? I think part of it is because we need to let go of things. But part of it is because, this is what he does. Jesus, who doesn't regard equality with God something to be grasped at, but he emptied himself and took the form of a slave. That is from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians. I think it's Philippians, pretty sure. Jesus isn't asking us to do something that he hasn't done. He was God and he came to earth where he can get stabbed by cactus needles. And he doesn't will them out of existence all the time. There's just a reality to it. The key to discipleship is life with Christ. The key to the whole thing is being with him. And sometimes I think the invitation for us here and now in our lives is best expressed we have all kinds of things going on in our hearts. Sometimes they're filled with joy and happiness, and sometimes they're filled with pain. And we're meant to bring that all to Christ, to bring that all to Jesus, to, if you're having a great day, then have a great day with Him. And if you're having a bad day, then have a bad day with Him. And if you're cooking chicken sausage gumbo, that would be fun to make. Cook chicken and sausage gumbo with Jesus. If you're from Louisiana or you have Louisiana gumbo, it includes shrimp, but you don't need to put the shrimp in. It still tastes good without it. I've tried, because I don't eat shrimp. If Jesus wasn't inviting us to do this with Him, if He wasn't promising to be there the whole way, if He wasn't promising to lead us and guide us, what He's asking would be bananas. We should rightfully be able to say no. Jesus, you're crazy. But His invitation is a path of communion. His invitation is to live like He did. And I think when we start to live this way, when we do start to let go of things, when we do start to engage in fasting and pull back from the things of this world, I hope you start to feel like, wow, there's real attachments here. I really like these things, and sometimes we take it for granted. Even now, I think of this heated seats and a heated steering wheel in your car are just becoming sort of standard equipment. Those are really nice to have. And it's good to stop yourself and to say, I should be thankful for this. The day that it doesn't work, you're mad at the mechanic, and it's you spent most of your life living without it, and now you had one thing for a while that you hardly even appreciated, and when it's gone, you're upset. Welcome to the book of Jonah, who does the same thing. Gets really upset when this plant that he didn't plant dies on him, and he's getting attacked by the sun. So Jesus goes across the Sea of Galilee into a new area. This is probably Gentile, eastern side of the sea, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. These were the first tribes to go into exile. Jesus is finally getting to this place that He's been going. And I don't know if it's on His way there or on His way back, but we have this moment where Jesus calms a storm. The Gospel of Mark actually gives a lot more detail for Christ calming a storm. I think He even does it more than once in the Gospel of Mark. Matthew just sort of jumps into it, oh yeah, well, He did this, and then there was a storm on the lake, and the disciples had to wake Him up because He was asleep in the boat. It's where'd they get in the boat? You missed some stuff here, dude. You did not say they got into a boat, so what are they floating on? But the Sea of Galilee is not all that large. So it's not like you don't get 20-foot waves, and ocean things, or if you've seen some of the pictures of winter storms on Lake Superior where the waves smash into the North Shore, and spray water hundreds of feet in the air. Not on the Sea of Galilee. I think something like Leech Lake in Minnesota is dramatically bigger than it. And you can get some waves on it, but they're not cataclysmic. So I think that something else is going on here when there is this kind of storm, that it's not just an ordinary storm. Some people try to say, well, the Sea of Galilee is in this valley and it could channel the wind and you could have bad waves. And it's sure, you could have bad waves. You could get 5-foot waves, maybe 6-foot waves. You can certainly have a time where it would be very uncomfortable to be out on the water. But it's not a tsunami. And we just have, it's easy when you read it to get this false image in your head of these towering waves way over their head and crashing down and the boat flying into the air and all of those things. And it's hard to make it like that and still be a reasonable storm. If it was really that bad, it would have split the earth in two, and it didn't do that. So if it was that bad, then in a way it's like the forces of chaos. It's like the forces of darkness, that it's more than an ordinary storm. In a sense, it echoes all the way back to creation. God separating light from darkness and containing things, containing the water. And I think that's the good image to have in mind here, because it helps you see why this event of calming the storm on the sea was so amazing. In a way, they're like, well, there's healers and people can get healed and we can see amazing miracles. But being able to change the weather is something that only God can do. And then in the midst of this all is like this dripping irony. So it's this cataclysmic storm and they're like, we're all gonna die. That's the conclusion. And you could imagine them panicking and eventually being like, where's Jesus? Where's Jesus? Maybe they think he got thrown over the side of the boat or something. And then they're like, he's asleep. You know, of all of the places for Jesus to be, asleep in the boat is not the one you'd expect in the middle of a storm where everyone thinks they're going to die. And if you've ever been on a boat in, like, if the wind suddenly comes up or the rain suddenly starts falling, you know that it's not a very comfortable place to be. You're not like, oh yes, we get to be on the boat in the rousing waves. I mean, sometimes it's not so bad, but when they really get big that you're in danger, you're like, hold on, we're getting off the water as fast as we can. Jesus is like, I think this is a good time to take a nap. Really? I would propose to you that this kind of exhaustion had to be pretty extreme, because it's not an ordinary time to take a nap. When you fly on airplanes, people rarely sleep through the turbulence. You know, like that's when you wake up, when the airplanes start shaking and everyone thinks they're going to die and they're screaming. Not like, oh, this is a perfect time to take a nap. And I think it also expresses something profound about him, that for Jesus to have a kind of supreme confidence of rest in the Father's arms, that no matter where he is, that his Father is there to care for him, is something that he lived with at every moment. And I suspect that that's not quite as real for you. Certainly not quite as real for me. You know, that kind of sense of the presence of God, that kind of confidence in him being there to care for you, that nothing that happens to you is outside of his will. And I think that can be a powerful place to pray, because I would start very many times, you know, Lord, I'm uncomfortable because this is not a place where I'd want to fall asleep. And in the places of weakness, in the places where you feel scared, that tends not to be the place where you have the most confidence, but the least, where God tends to feel furthest away. I think those are beautiful places to bring our hearts and to invite Jesus to come and be with us in that kind of moment, to share with us his confidence. Sister Miriam James Headland, in one of the videos that she made for the beginning of a season of Lent retreat for Word on Fire, they have the introductory video on YouTube. I don't know if they have any of the other ones, but she has this great line. I think it's something like, his love set order in me. His love brought me into order. It's something like that. The idea is that it's actually, like, sometimes we think that we have to become better to be with Jesus. That, like, when stuff gets fixed, when we're more confident, then God will be more present. But she emphasizes something really beautiful, that it's actually God's presence in the moment, in the midst of the difficulty, that brings my heart, that brings my life into order. So if you want to be brought into order, you should bring your disorder to Jesus. There's something profound in that we try to run from disorder, we try to run from our darkness and our struggles, but it's actually in bringing them to him that our hearts come into right order, that he sets love in order inside of us. I think that's really beautiful. So Jesus gets up and he's like, why were you afraid? It can be easy to feel like Jesus falls asleep in our life sometimes. And it talks about he rebukes the waves. Now that's a strange thing to say. You would think, like, say, quiet down, you'd think, but to rebuke them, this is usually the kind of word that he uses when he's casting out a demon. He rebukes the demon. Well, why would you be rebuking demon waves unless they were of a different kind than storms normally are? So he rebukes the waves. And you also have this really profound contrast that's fascinating. One question you could ask is, where is the storm? Because it's easy to read as the storm being on the outside, that the storm is in the water, that the storm is in the landscape around. But is it not true that sometimes the storm is inside, in our hearts? That it's actually the internal storms that are bigger deals than the external ones. And, so again, it's like, it brings us to this place of starting to recognize that when we look at the layers of Scripture, like, yes, you can look at it outside of you, but I think a great way to approach this passage is also to ask, what is a storm inside? What are the waves that are beating against the boat? Where are the places that you feel like you're at the end of your rope? Those are places where genuinely Jesus tends to feel like he's asleep, where it tends to feel like he's not there or he doesn't care. And again, I think this is another powerful invitation in this passage of like, bring that internal storm to Jesus. Sometimes it is an external storm in your life. Sometimes you're in the middle of it and life is happening and it's people around you and it's outside of you. I know certainly our world can feel like that right now, and I wouldn't blame anyone for thinking of it that way. But don't neglect the reality that the storm can also be inside of us. And even in the story, one could say that the storm is also in the hearts of the apostles who are in the boat with Jesus, as much as it is out in the water. And so then Jesus rebukes the waves, and it goes from cataclysmic storm, like a storm of uncreation, a storm of darkness, a storm of evil, to peace and calm. And then they say something strange. What kind of man is this? Now, I mean, maybe that's the logical conclusion. What kind of man is this? Like, who does this? But it's a strange way to say it. Like, you're Jewish people. You should be making the connection, though, like, could this person actually be God? Like, that would be the way that I would ask the question. Not what kind of man does this, but could God do this? It's not what they ask. And I like those things. Like, one of the things that is really, really helpful to realize is when we talk about movements of heart, when we talk about things to pray with, sometimes it's that kind of opposition. It's like, well, that's not what I would say. Like, no, I don't like that. That's a good place to pray. Like, sometimes it's that clashing heads that's as good as like, oh, that warms my heart or that draws my attention. Sometimes the places that the Lord is working at are a lot more like a sliver that he picks at. And guess what happens if you pick at a sliver? It hurts like the dickens. It can sit there for a long time, and then all of a sudden you notice it and you start playing with it and trying to get it out, and then it hurts and it's painful and